Hey there, this is Manny, the founder and CEO of Blue. Today I'm going to be doing a bit of a different video. I'm going to be vibe coding an MCP server for Blue. And so I'm literally from scratch, go all the way from really trying to understand what an MCP server is, all the way to actually having hopefully some production ready code that we can use, and we can try this on Claude and on a few other systems as well. So yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. This would give you the ability to basically talk to a large language model and read data from Blue, but also write data to Blue as well. So let's get going. I expect this video to take probably quite a few hours. I would imagine, 4 or 5 hours perhaps. Maybe it's going to be shorter, who knows? We might be surprised with how quickly the AI can do its job. But to start with, I've researched a few MCP sort of frameworks or implementations. There's one here on GitHub, which is actually the kind of official one from Model Context Protocol, which is what MCP stands for. However, as we can see, it's version 0.3. And so I think it's important when choosing frameworks or libraries, etc., to make sure that you choose something that makes sense for the project. So in this case, it's likely that there's going to be breaking changes, as it says here on the notes, and they're likely only going to have a working version, later in September. So this is probably not for us. Then there's a couple of other options. There's this one. It's got 45 stars, 8 forks, last updated 3 months ago. And then we can see here, this one has got a lot more commits, updated last week, and 7,000 stars. So I think this is definitely the one to go for. It seems the most popular, and it's a clear choice for us. So first things first, I'm gonna navigate to the directory I have on my computer for all stuff Blue. So if I show here, you can see that I've got the Blue API, the Blue front end, the Python module, a demo builder, which we'll probably go into a little bit more in depth during this video, because we've sort of built a bunch of tools already for large language models, and I can probably demo that as well, and website code and so on. So this is basically the main kind of folder where I keep all my Blue stuff in here. So we're gonna make a new folder called MCP, and then we're gonna navigate to that as well. So now we have this empty folder, and I'm gonna initialize Claude. I'm gonna be using Claude Code, which is really pretty cool. It's a terminal interface to use Claude. All of our engineers at Blue use it. I use it as well as my sort of daily driver. And it's kind of strange to think that you sort of work on a terminal, especially in 2025. I didn't expect that to be the case for me. I thought, okay, I'm always going to work in a GUI, right, a graphical user interface. But actually, it's really, really good. So we'll try this out. So I just typed Claude, I hit enter, and now I'm ready to get started. So I think the first thing I also want to do, I'm going to spin up another terminal here as well. And I think the important thing to do is to start a Git, so we can start tracking our files, because this is really important when working with large language models and things like Cursor or Claude, because you always want to be able to kind of roll back your changes if required, right? So you want to, as you kind of develop things, you want to be constantly saving your changes into Git, so you can roll back. You can do that kind of stuff, so you're not working for 3 hours and then something breaks and you have no idea, why it broke, and you can't roll back to previous versions. So I'll just do git init, and now I've got an empty Git repository, and I can also open up Git desktop, and I can actually add this repository as well. So I'll go to Blue, and then I'll open MCP and add the repo. So now we've got this, and it's a completely empty repository file. Okay, so because we're going to be using this, I'm simply going to copy and paste this here. And I've just given it some quick instructions. I've said, hey, I want to set up Go in this folder. This is the name that I want to use. So now it's going to start setting things up. So this is the nice thing with Claude Code as well. It can actually run commands the same way that I run it on the terminal over here. So yeah, I'll say yes. So that's now created. And now we're going to be installing the MCP Go dependency. So I'll do that. And this is what I really like about Golang, is that unlike sort of Node.js, where you get into kind of dependency hell and you end up pulling sometimes hundreds of libraries and gigabytes of code that you don't really know what it does. Go tends to be a bit more grown up in that case. You tend to use fewer higher quality libraries. The standard library is also very powerful, and so you don't really need to download so much external software. So okay, it's actually gone ahead and created a sort of sample main.go. So we'll go ahead and accept that, and then it's verified the setup works. And I'm also going to open up the project in Cursor as well. People are often saying, oh, what's better, Cursor or Claude and so on. And I think it really, I'd say it depends, right? Like what you're using it for. Sometimes there's things that Cursor is much better at because you can actually look at the code at the same time and so on. There are other times when this is absolutely fine, right? So let's try doing this. So it's going to download the missing dependencies. And this is really where large language models excel at, is when they're given guardrails, but also where they can see the effect of their actions. So for instance, they can run something, see the error, and then course correct, right? Because they'll very rarely get everything done first time. Okay, so this is now basically trying to do a test. So let's see what this does. So it's checking the documentation. And again, I just really have to keep hitting yes or no on Claude and give it instructions, and it will basically keep going. So I think the first step would be to probably just get a a working version with a test example. Now, while it's doing that, I have a env file in the demo builder that's got actually our credentials for Blue. So this is the Blue API configuration. So I'm actually going to create a file here as well, and I'm going to copy and paste these credentials. Now it's very, very important when you are working with Blue API and you've got an auth token or a client ID, is to absolutely never do what I'm doing and is share this with people outside, because with these two things you can basically do everything on Blue that I can do, right? Because these is my authorization token, my client ID. So obviously I will be deleting these before I publish a video, but again, it's just a heads up here. So all right, so we've got some changes here. That it's read the documentation, so obviously I'd hallucinated a little bit prior, so let's go yes, and it's still getting some errors. And this will be very typical when you're vibe coding. You'll sort of constantly get errors, and sometimes you'll make a lot of progress and you'll get stuck on a small thing, and then you'll spend a lot of time on that sort of small setup, and that's actually quite natural. It can be a bit frustrating, but I think it's typically fine. But it allows you to do so much more than you could do yourself in terms of coding, right? So right now, we're probably 10 minutes in, and already we've installed libraries. We're getting some of the kind of documentation going here, and getting an example going without really having to read too much on this, right? I've just done a Shift tab on Claude Code, so you'll see that it's accept edits on. So now you can actually edit the code on my computer without having to ask me. Now this is limited to the specific folder that we're in, so it can't go up a folder and then change other files on my computer. This is a pretty safe thing to do. Let's see if this then builds. Looking good. Okay, awesome. So now we have a working example. Now I don't actually know what this does, so I'm going to interrupt Claude Code, and I'm simply going to ask. And you can see that I made some spelling errors here. I often used to go back and edit them, but then I realized it makes no difference because we're not writing to a human. It's completely understandable, so it doesn't really cause any problems in terms of getting a good answer back as well. So, so we've got a MCP. Let me make this a bit bigger as well. So this sets up a model context protocol server in Go that provides a standardized way for LLMs to interact with external tools and data. So we've got tools, functions that LLMs can call to perform actions. Get current time. Okay, that makes sense. That's a very easy tool. And then we're using system info. So I guess that's basically I'm using Mac right now, so basically that's probably a way that Mac can expose the time. And also a reusable interaction template. Okay, awesome. So this is neat. So I think we should try and use this with Claude Desktop. So I'm going to ask it, can you research how to set up a MCP with Claude Desktop online, and then help me to set this up on my local computer. All right, so basically I'm telling, and this is really good, the ability for agents to be able to research online means you don't even really have to open your browser and read the documentation. Again, so it does a web search, so I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to press 2, I'm going to say yes, and don't ask again for web search commands, right? Because it's not something that Claude can do to kind of destroy my code or anything like this, searching online. I don't want it to have to ask me every time. So this is actually great. All right, so now it's researching on this. It's found 10 results. I can also, I believe, do Control R, and it gives me more details. Okay, in this case, I still can't see the URLs, but yes, showing detailed transcript, and then Control R to toggle. So this shows less information. Normally when there's like long code changes and stuff like that, pressing Control R will give you the full kind of changes and also some of the internal thinking of the agents as well. So now it's kind of thinking through this. And then, as I understand it, essentially we've got to run this Go program, which is basically the MCP server. And then we essentially need to just write a file for this. Okay, so basically, Claude Code can only list files in the allowed working directories for this session. So perhaps maybe this is something that I should ask. So you cannot access the Claude directory. So are you going to give me a file and a set of commands to copy it into the right place? Is that the next step? And so again, when you're not clear on things, you can just ask questions. Really treat it like you're pair programming when vibe coding. Okay, great. So it's written 8 lines. So if we go to Git desktop, we can see that we've got this sort of setup here. So MCP server, MCP blue, command, and it's this. Okay, so this seems kind of interesting. So okay, so it's given me this thing that I need to copy. So I'm going to copy and paste this. CP is for copy. I'm going to go here and I'm going to copy that. Okay, awesome. Then I need to make sure that this is executable. And again, if you didn't know what this is, you can again also ask, right? So I could say here, and can you explain what this does, right? In the meantime, I'm actually going to copy and paste this here. And so, okay, so chmod or chmod, I'm not sure, plus X makes a file executable, able to run as a program. So change mode, command that modifies file permissions, adds the execute and the permission. Got it. Awesome. So let me copy this command across, and I'll copy back this to say to verify. Perfect. So this is now working. So, okay, so then we ask, what's next to test this out? And what's actually quite cool, we can also test out the plan mode on Claude Code, which is pretty powerful. So, okay, so this has been done. Okay, I need to reopen I need to open Claude Code, Claude Desktop, sorry. Easy to get confused. So okay, I need to actually sign in. So let me do that. This is my email, by the way, so feel free to email me if you've got questions. I'm always happy to answer. So we'll be signing in any moment now, and then we should be able to try this out. I can get rid of, this is not the one that we're using. All right. I'll skip this for now. Cool. All right. So yeah, that's cool. We see MCP blue here. So let's try this. Use greeting prompt for Sarah. Perhaps I need to be stricter and actually say that they need to use the MCP. Okay, so this is interesting. So Claude would like to use this tool, MCP blue, get current time. I'm going to click allow always. Okay, let's try Rome, Italy, and then Tokyo, Japan. All right, we're getting some kind of error here. Let me try this again. Okay, so let me update anyway. I'll tell Claude Code that I can see the MCP blue in the list of tools, and it is able to give me the current time zone in UTC. So then let's see, can you use this tool to give the greeting prompt? Okay, so I'm not sure. Let's just copy and paste this in. This is what I get from Claude Desktop. And let's actually take a look at the main.go, what this actually does. Sometimes it is good to actually look at the code. So this gets the UTC time zone. So obviously, I think that's why it failed to give me the time in Rome, Italy, and in Japan, because it doesn't, with this sort of simple software that we have here only does UTC. Okay. Add a prompt for greeting users. Okay, so that was a prompt, not a tool. That's fine. We don't really need resources or prompts, or I think, for what we want to do with our Blue setup, because we're going to basically be providing a whole bunch of tools that Claude can use. So this is actually working correctly. So this is great. So before we now get into try and convert this to use the Blue API for various things, I want to show you what we've been doing with the actual demo project. So I'm going to be opening the demo builder, sorry. So this is something that we made earlier, and it's, as you can see, let me make this a bit bigger. So this is a set of tools that gives a simplified way for large language models to interact with the Blue API. So instead of having to kind of learn the API and know it up front, they can just run a very simple program with a few flags, which I will show you, and it can get information. And we've got the .env file that we discussed earlier here with my authentication. So let's try this out. So I'm going to navigate to Demo Builder. So you can see we've got all our things here, and I'm going to go and put Claude. And now I'm going to actually open Blue up. So I'm using the desktop version of Blue, and we're going to go to Blue Demo. So this is where essentially I try things out on Blue. So I'm going to move this to the side here. So I'm going to ask, first of all, can you give me a list of projects? Okay. And so I'll retrieve a list of projects for you. You can see that this is the simplified command. It just needs to go run read project simple, and then it's going to show a bunch of projects. And again, this is where the Control R can come in handy. So I can do Control R to expand, and it will show me a bunch of projects. You can say that with navigation. You can also do, I've got probably a lot more than 20 projects in this demo. Yeah, I've got 180. So obviously it can also do in batches of 20. And so it shows me here all the various projects. So then I can say, okay, let's create a new project. So let's create a new project called Mani Demo. So if I do this, what should happen here is, yeah, you can see that we've got a new project called Mani Demo. So then we can go in here, and then I can say, okay, create a set of lists for a software engineering project. So now Claude Code is going to decide, okay, what's the sort of process for a typical software project? And then it creates it, and you can see Blue updates in real time. So we have backlog, to do in-progress code review, testing, and done. So exactly what we would typically expect. And then finally, we can say, okay, create some dummy records for a process management software. All right, so essentially what would be the tasks of things that we would be kind of building, right? So now it's pontificating. I like how Claude Code sort of creates different types of loading words. It's a very, very nice little touch, depending on the context. And what I read about this is that they use one of their very lightweight models, which is super fast, to pass the context and then come back with just one single word that makes sense for the context. So in this case, it's pontificating. So yeah, you can see that it's now creating a bunch of records for our demo project. So essentially, this is a little bit like an MCP server, but we've sort of done it ourselves in our own way. So just giving the simplified kind of commands, and we have a Claude.md file here, which essentially is a set of instructions for the large language model, which will tell it exactly how to use all the different tools. And we've got about 17 tools here. So, your typical create, read, update, and delete set of tools. So you can create a project, create records, create tags, delete project, delete records. So we have to be careful with those, of course. And then, reading a bunch of stuff and also updating a project. So yeah, so this is essentially what we want to do, but for the MCP server. I'm gonna pause this. So you can see that it's created a bunch of stuff here. Now let's go ahead and delete this project and clean up. So because I no longer need this, it'll basically, I can say, okay, delete project, and you can see it's got the confirm flag here, and that's important. So you must basically put this flag in here for then actually delete the project. And you can see here, in fact, I now get an error when I try to click on a record, and then I can go back to the welcome page. So that's essentially what we're trying to do with the MCP Blue server. So this is good. So now that we have a working test version, I think the next step is to try and get a very, very simple working version for reading projects, because that's the simplest thing. So what I will say here is that let's not worry about this. Let's focus on tools. There is a demo project folder in the directory above you. Go into it and take a look at the tool that we want to review is called read projects. Okay, so I'm just going to copy the path here as well. So and I'm going to explain this is a non-MCP tool that I created to read projects, and I have a .env file already with the authentication. How can we make a simple tool for reading projects for this MCP server that we have set up? Okay, so let's see what happens here. In fact, what we can do, I'm going to do Command Tab again, and you can see that I'm cycling through accept mode, plan mode, and then default mode. So I'm going to go to plan mode and make a detailed step-by-step plan explaining what we need to do at each step and why. And I always like to put and why, because that makes it very easy for us to understand as humans, especially if you don't have kind of domain expertise in something like this. So for instance, for me, I'm brand new to the whole MCP setup. And so I do need to understand why it's doing something so I can critically analyze it, because sometimes large language models go on a complete tangent. So I can take potentially the reasoning and I can go on Perplexity or on Google and then do my own reading if required. All right, so it's updating its to-dos. And in this case, because it's a directory outside of the current directory, it does ask for permissions. I'm going to press 2 so I can keep the access to the directory throughout our working session. All right, so now it's basically reading through the code base of the Blue Demo Builder, and then hopefully it will make a nice plan for us to review. What I also quite like about vibe coding, especially when there's things that the AI is doing that are quite repetitive, is that it's a fairly, it can be at least sometimes, fairly sort of kind of high-level direction that you need to give, and then it's doing all the details and doing its own testing and so on. And so it's kind of something that you can do in the evening if you're not at full brain power. You can kind of half watch Netflix and half do something like this for fun, right? It doesn't have to be like this where we're 100% looking at it, and you know, you can let it run and then come back to it and review things later. So for instance, we've got a plan here. So overview. So we're going to create an MCP tool that can allow Claude Desktop. Let me make this bigger as well. So to read Blue projects using the existing GraphQL authentication from the Demo Builder project. So copy the EMB file. That's already done, but anyway, we won't correct it. Update Go model dependencies. Yes. Okay. So we need this to load the .env. So that's the Y. Create client.go. Okay. Perfect. Create types. Create a read project tool. This seems pretty good to me. There may be a couple of things that I'm gonna ask for a change, and then this is based on my knowledge. So instead of saying yes, auto accept edits, or yes and manually approve edits, I'm gonna say no, keep planning, and I'm gonna say a few things. Let's make a tools.go to list all tools, and use main.go as just a clean startup script and orchestration, right? So because in Golang, that's best practice. We don't want to just throw everything into main.go and then have to refactor later on. So that's one change. Then once you've updated the plan, write the plan to plan.md, so a markdown file, and then start on the plan and mark things as done as you go along with a tick emoji, and update the plan with any deviations. So let's see what happens here. So I expect it to update the plan. So yeah, we've got a better architecture with tools.go for tool definition and a clean main.go for orchestration. So it's going to make that. Then it's going to save to a plan.md file. And then we can actually say, yeah, let's go ahead and auto-accept the edits, and it starts to work. And then it will, each time it finishes a step, we'll go back and update the plan.md. Now, the main reason for this, actually is two main reasons. One, I find it, when you have a plan that's written, and it's not just in the sort of memory of Claude in the history of the chat, but actually in a markdown file, it seems to follow it better. And two, it also means that you can pause, you can stop things, and 2-3 days or a week later come back and you've got the plan, and you can just continue from there right away, right? So let's see here. We've got the copy authentication, we update the Go module dependencies, the client, the types. This is good. I think for these two, I'm gonna remove. That's the only thing I'm gonna say. So this is perfect. Just remove these as we no longer need them. Okay, so that's kind of it. So this is really a good way, I think, of working with agents, is get them to do a plan, then use our superiority, I think, in overall context handling and planning, because humans, I think, still have the edge, especially for really, really long-term planning. I think AI is not there yet. And then we let the AI do what it's good at, which is writing code really quickly, debugging, being able to read logs, that kind of stuff, to basically create working software. So let's just check that that's sorted. So yeah, we'll just keep the get current time, because I think will be nice to try this out. And I think that's good. Let's say yes and auto accept edits. Now, interesting enough, I don't know if it's going to write the plan.md or it's just going to start right from step one and forget that I asked it. So it seems that, okay, no, it has remembered. So let me write the plan to plan.md. Sometimes we need a little bit of patience when it's doing its thing, but it's easy to also forget, how lucky we are to be able to use these tools. I mean, I pay $200 a month for this, right? So it's like what, $7, $8 a day, and I get access to an advanced AI model that investors have poured billions of dollars into building, right? So when you think of it that way, it is actually quite affordable, and also, it's easy to forget how this seems like it would have been like complete magic 10 years ago to be able to talk to a computer like this and, co-program as a pair. And, it's only been out a little bit, really a few years in Claude Code, even less than that. And we can already begin to get used to it and get frustrated with it. So it's very, very interesting. But this is also what makes the bar go higher and higher and higher over time. And it pushes companies in the competitive market to actually keep delivering really, really good tools. So now we're basically, we just let it do its thing. It's going through, it's got a plan. You can see that it's updating the plan as we go along. And we simply just wait. So this is kind of where one could, do something else. You could pretty much do auto accept. You can watch Netflix, you can read a book, you can play a chess game, text your friends, whatever, right? And you just let it go. The other opportunity, of course, this takes some time to get used to, is to actually do multiple different things with different Claude Code instances. So I can actually have another terminal open with another version of Claude Code doing something completely different, maybe some front-end work or some back-end API work or whatever. And you're basically switching between the two. And you can do this with 2, 3, 4, depending how good you are at splitting your attention. So it's you can also get a lot done. But I've done it before, but it's incredibly intensive. It's quite draining. Like you do an hour of managing 4 or 5 agents at a time, and it's quite tiring because it's like managing a team, right? So good. So this is doing its thing. We're on step 4. So now it's refactoring the existing tools to use tools.go. So instead of putting it on main.go, which was our entry point in Golang, it's going to take it to a separate file and keep main.go very, very clean. It's also very nice to do these videos because I think by vocalizing my thinking of this, it also helps me too, because I'm thinking step by step, right? So it's almost a sort of hierarchy of agents, right? I'm sort of managing myself, and then I am managing an agent, right? And it's also interesting, Claude can have sub-agents, so it can even go deeper than that. But I think typically they're better for simple repetitive tasks, this sort of high-end planning that we're doing. So, all right, tools.go is now written. And I don't really expect this to work right away. I expect there to be issues for sure. But then this is the whole point. And I'll show you, if we do run into issues, I'll show you how I like to solve them as well. I think the important thing is to say, okay, if we have an issue, we then build a hypothesis on what the issue is, and then we can do that, or we can ask the AI agent to do that as well. And then we need to test for those hypotheses, typically with debug logs or test scripts, to then get to the root cause, fix it, and then continue. Now, typically, I wouldn't actually be working exactly like in this video where I'm typing. Typically, I use a voice-to-text platform on my Mac. Mac has got one built in, which is pretty good. You can press the F5 key on it on any modern MacBook to basically just dictate. I use a platform here called Flow, and you can see that I've dictated a lot of words here, 178,000 words, which is probably a couple of good-sized books. And I've set it up, so I just hit function, then I say what I want to say, and then it will basically write it for me. So this is good because I can just, again, double tap function. I can just basically talk at the top of my mind like I'm doing now. Then it will write it, and then I can just hit send and send it to the agent, right? So, okay, so we've tried to build the binary. We're running into some issues. So now it's fixing it. So again, this is really, really good that the errors come out and it's able to fix that, right? So I think this is also likely, my prediction is that, we've got two types of languages, right? One that are sort of statically typed, like Golang, where, you literally can't build and run your program unless everything is structured correctly, right? And all the syntax is correct and so on. And then, kind of dynamically typed languages, Python, JavaScript without TypeScript and so on, where that doesn't happen and the errors actually happen, at runtime, right? Later on. So users will catch your errors. So, okay, so let's see. We're testing the integration. So the server's starting correctly, and let's see if it's able to list tools. Okay, now it's updating the okay, so I think that's pretty much it. We should be able to restart Claude Desktop, and it should pick that up. So once this is done, I will then ask Claude Code what we can do here. Okay, so it's asking me to copy the config, so it's not already done. So let me do this. So basically just do this, so that's done. And then restart Claude Code. And let's see what we have. MCP blue. Okay. So can you read blue projects? using MCP Blue tool. Okay, let's do always allow. This is pretty exciting. If this works, I'm going to be... okay, so we're running into some authentication issues, and I guess that makes sense because the authentication we have right now is in our sort of directory with the MCP, and so maybe we need to set this up. So let me copy and paste this here. I'll say, looks like we didn't think about authentication. This is the message I get from Claude Desktop. And then I'm going to say, how can we add authentication here? Let me know your plan. And I'm going to put it into plan mode because I need to understand this, because again, this is really out of my domain expertise. Like I have no idea how authentication works with MCP setups, and so I want to understand what's the best approach. So yeah, so it runs in a different environment context. So okay, so the issue is clear. When we're loading without a path, it means it looks for the .env in the current working directory. All right, so this is clear. So create a wrapper script. I kind of think this might be the actually easiest option. I'm not 100% sure about the security implications, but I think for now should be fine. Can we use this option instead? So again, later on we can then look at security, but again, in this case, if users are going to be adding environmental variables in their Claude desktop config on their computer, it should be pretty safe because already that's a sort of safe environment, right? So cool. All right. Yeah, let's accept this. So now it's reading the env file. It's going to update the config, and I probably will have to do the manual command to copy it across. So we've got the API URL, auth token client ID, and company ID. It's running the simulating the environment. Okay, so it's tested it, perfect. It's running that command as well for us. So yes. Then I guess I'll probably need to restart Claude Code as well. Yeah, okay. So let's do this again. I'll copy this message. So Claude, and again, let's see. Very, very excited here. Okay, that's really awesome. So this is actually working. So I'm going to copy and paste this in and into here. Wow, I'm smiling like ear to ear here. This is so cool. We're 50 minutes into this video and we actually have a working MCP that connects to Blue and allows you to read the project. So I'm going to check this response. Seems that it is working. How can we get more than just the account, but also the project names and IDs? And right now, this is probably a good time to actually, I'm going to just pause this. It's probably a good time that now that we've got a sort of working version to actually do an initial commit. So now this is quite important. I'm going to discard this backup file here. Now the .env, this always needs to be ignored because it's got key information. You never want to put API keys, tokens, secrets into version control. Super important this. So I'm going to add this to the git ignore file, which basically lists which files are not going to be part of the version control. And also this, again, we do not want to put the Claude desktop config file into version control because that's got sensitive details as well. So I'm going to ignore this. And also the plan.md, we don't need that at all because that's just something that's going to constantly change. It's just for internal use. And finally, the binary. So this is the actual build when we build our Go program and it turns into a binary. We don't need to version control that either. So everything else is good. So I'm just going to put initial working version. And I'm going to commit this. So now we've basically saved our progress, and then we can sort of take a look and say, okay, can you explain what we are actually returning in our response? So I want to really try and understand what are we returning, because it was page 1 and page size 20. So this was the request and response found 20 projects. Okay, interesting. I wonder if get more information. What did you get back? Again, LLMs are not deterministic, right? So sometimes, depending on how you ask things, you'll get different responses back. Okay, so I'm going to also copy and paste this. I tried again to ask for more info, but I just got this. Don't think we need to update the text summary, but double check our tool response. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of debugging and figuring things out. Again, especially when you're working on new things that you have really nothing, in terms of knowledge, right? I don't really know much about MCP. We need to act a bit like investigators and try and figure out what's going on. So in this case, it's testing the tool programmatically. So, okay, let's try this and see what comes back. And you always want to take whatever the large language model is telling you with a pinch of salt, right? Often it's right, but often it gets things that are subtly wrong, right? So, okay, our tool is returning all the data. Yes, okay. So this seems like a pretty good hypothesis. So basically saying, hey, we are returning all the data, but the text representation only includes found 2 projects. The issue is that Claude Desktop only displays the text content to users. So while this is good, it could also be completely made up, completely fabricated, right? We don't know this is necessarily the truth, that this bold part is true. It sounds correct, but who knows, right? So what I can do is I can copy and paste this. You could go on Perplexity or you can Google for this, but I'm just going to do it right here. Can you verify that this is true via a web search? So So now we're asking Claude to, okay, you've told us this, go online and search to make sure that it's actually true what you're saying, right? Because often large language models will hallucinate, or which is, I think, is a very kind way of basically saying they lie, but in a very, very confident manner. And so it's important that we, you trust in God, but you cut the cards, right? I think that's an ancient Chinese saying. So, we can trust in Claude, but we still verify. So in this case, again, if it was an area where I had more expertise in, I think for sure we would want to, I would probably be able to sniff out what's bullshit and what's not. But in this case, this is something completely new to me. And so it's actually important that we do some sort of verification here. So it's done its web search. It'll be interesting to see what we come back with. Because if it is true, then it simply means that we change the structure of the text representation. If it's not true, then maybe there's another problem as well, right? Of course, it's also fine. We didn't necessarily need to do this. We could have just accepted this, had it update the code, restart Claude desktop, and try it again, right? I just wanted to give an example of how we can verify things without having to do trial and error necessarily. All right, let's see. Now it's cooking. So let's see what happens here. Okay, interestingly, the searches don't directly confirm whether Claude Desktop only displays text content from MCP tools. Let me search more specifically. Okay, it'll be interesting to see. So it's got page 1, page size, include archived, include templates, false. Okay, so this seems good. I think the next step is to just say, okay, let's do this, and then we'll try this out. And there's no harm in that. Again, everything we're doing is version controlled. So it doesn't matter that we change things or we break stuff. We can always easily roll back to the previous state. And this is really important. I've seen a whole bunch of Reddit threads online of people vibe coding, spending a week or 2 weeks building something, and then they just get stuck in a problem. Or worse, the agent that they're using deletes all the old code and they have no backup of it, right? For whatever reason. And I've even heard horror stories of people having their production databases, so the actual database with the real user data on their server being deleted by a large language model because they had the authentication for that database available to the large language model. So, we've really got to treat large language models as like savants, right? They're incredibly good at certain things, but they can also do, sometimes they just don't have the context and they can do, really, really stupid things and only realize it after the fact. I guess probably a lot of humans can do that too, right? But, they seem to be very good at being confidently wrong. So, okay, let's see here. Okay, so now we've got the tool returns detailed project information. By the way, this has been much faster than I had assumed. We're at the 1 hour mark right now, and we already have sort of at least a partially working implementation. I thought this was going to take literally quite a long time. So, good. Okay, let's try this out. So I'm going to list my blue projects. And I wonder if it realizes that it has to use the MCP blue tool. Yeah, it does. Okay, that's interesting. So, and how cool is that? So, yeah, let's try a different page. Yes, let's try page 3. So, because blue returns projects in batches of 20, and then does what's called pagination. So it gives, saying, okay, well, you have 180 projects, you have 20 pages of, 9 pages of 20 projects. So cool. This is really awesome. So let's try this. Search with a project with demo in the name. Let's see if that works. This is very, very cool. Okay, now with Manny. And so you can see how it's very, very simple for the AI to use this MCP, right? So essentially, my understanding so far of MCP is that essentially it's a JSON wrapper for APIs. So instead of having to understand and hard code the Blue API with a large language model, so it really knows the structure, it can just on the fly discover the structure, make very, very simple JSON-based requests, and then it gets information back very, very simply. So this is amazing. It's working super well. I'm going to commit this change as well. There's a test search and a test tool, which I think we can remove, then the tools. So I want to give you also an interesting tip here, working with agents. You can also ask it to commit. So for instance, here I can say, can you clean up the test files and then commit the updated changes to tools.go with a clear commit message. So now what it will do, most likely, I expect it to delete the 2 test scripts that it created, because we actually don't need these, right? They were just tests. And then to actually create a command. So yeah, RM is the remove tool. So it's removing test tools and test search. So yes. And again, you always have to be very careful when you see RM. And, this is if you're on a Mac or a Linux-based system, I guess. I'm not sure what Windows does. And so now it's checking the git status, the git diff, and now it's staging our changes. So we're adding the changes of tools.go, and now we'll make a commit. And typically, with Claude, this is a bit cheeky of them. They include this, generated with Claude AI code, co-authored by Claude. Now, if you don't want that, you can put into your claude.md file, or just tell it when you're committing to say, hey, do not mention Claude. But in this case, I'm happy to leave this here. So I'll say yes. So we can see here that I've got this, here we've got just initial working version, but when I click proceed, it's actually going to make the commit. And you can see here we've got this. And then, well, interesting, we actually get two people. You've got me with a lovely photo of me of when I was 4 years old with a bowl haircut, and a lovely suntan. And then we also got Claude here as well. So then that's now done. So this is fantastic. So we've proven that we're able to read data from Blue. I think the next step, and then I'll probably be happy to wrap up the video there, would be to say, okay, how can we write data to Blue? I think that's going to be really amazing. And so I think the most obvious one is to create a project. So I'm going to say, this is working great. I now want to be able to create a project. Can you look into the tools folder in the demo builder to find the tool for create a project, so you have the right query. Okay, I think that should be enough instructions, honestly, for it to do this. I expect that it's going to be able to one-shot this, but maybe I'm being too optimistic. Okay, so it's got the create project input type. So this is types are like basically the structure of things in Golang. So it's a technical thing. So okay, we've got this. So this is basically what we're going to actually send. So that's been added to our types.go. Now we add the constants to a new file as well. Yeah, we've got a few constants like the the categories, the project colors available, that kind of stuff. And then now we create a project tools in tools.go. Now, most likely, if this was going to be a bigger project with a lot of tools, we would do the same thing that we did with the demo builder, which we would have a tools folder and then one file per tool, not just dumping everything into tools.go. But it's not a huge problem for this sort of test MCP that we've got going. And I think what would be really powerful in the future with this kind of stuff, and I think this is where most managers would use an MCP, is not really to write data into Blue, but it's more to say, to chat to an AI and say, hey, I have this project full of data, right? Like maybe, thousands of records, right? Potentially, and say, hey, I need to know the, every record that matches this criteria. And then it can return a list back. And even we could give tools that do aggregation or sums based on different custom field types. So for instance, we may have a number custom field or a profit custom field. We can say, hey, tell me the total profit across all records for records that match this criteria. And then the large language model would know to read all the data by filtering, and then it can actually use another tool to do the maths and sum everything up. Now, we typically don't want to do maths in large language models because the way that they work, and it's a bit complex, but essentially they break words into tokens, they don't really do maths. They essentially predict what the answer would be like for a given kind of mathematical sort of function. And so they're very good at things that come up very frequently in in the training data, but then things that are not in the training data, they're likely to get it wrong. So typically it's much better to allow large language models to use calculators or write code to then do calculations, because they're able to write the calculation very accurately. They just not able to actually work out the answer by themselves, right? Okay, so now this is jumping a little ahead. It's already saying, hey, let's stage the changes and so on. Now, while I was talking, it was sort of testing things out, but we don't actually know if this is working. I haven't checked anything. So I'm going to say no. Now, if it is working, we should have a project called test MCP project. So I can go over to the Blue Mac app. Let's open it up. Let's click on Blue Demo. And oh wow, we have it here. So yeah, I'm smiling ear to ear here. This is really kind of cool and amazing. And so we've got the ability to write data into Blue. So I think what we can do, I'll do Control R again to make this smaller. And so I'm going to ask, can I test this in Claude Desktop by restarting before we do a commit? I think the answer will probably be yes. So I'm going to restart Claude Code, and I'm going to say, can you create a project called Manny is Smiling? Okay, so we've got create Blue project, MCP Blue, great, allow always. Okay, so big test, let's go back to Blue Desktop app. Let's go to Blue Demo, and we have the Manny is Smiling project created through Claude Desktop. And I think that's a wrap for today. We've created a simple MCP server that can get the current time, is able to read the Blue projects, search for them, and also do pagination on them, and is also able to create a Blue project. So most likely we will keep building on this. It's definitely my vision to allow everybody to interface with their Blue data through large language models. I think that's really the future. I think we're moving away from static dashboards, which will still be useful for many scenarios, but I think people like to have the ability to interact with their data on the go. So I think this, I'm sure in the future, will be available also through mobile applications. I think ChatGPT, I've heard, is going to come out with MCP support. Claude desktop has it already, but I'm sure it will come to mobile as well in the future. And so you're able to work with a really, really nice chat interface without any problems. And what's nice is that from our side, as you can see, it's not hugely time intensive to build this stuff out. Like, I think probably next week, with the week of engineering, we can create 15, 20 different tools, make sure that we test them well, and we actually have a great MCP out here. So awesome. Feel free to drop a comment on the video if you've got questions or ideas on use cases that you would use a Blue MCP server. And you can also email me directly at manny@blue.cc and the team in general at support@blue.cc. Thank you very much.